For those who don't know, unless you ride a Ducati, becoming a motorcyclist also means becoming an apprentice DIY mechanic. Many motorcycles typically live hard lives. They're rode hard and put away wet, which means that they need more maintenance than a normal commuter car would. But luckily for us, most bikes are also pretty damn simple to work on. Being able to do basic maintenance items will save you money, save you time, and save the ability of your bike going to the shop, which will instill confidence in your ability to keep your bike happy and healthy. Without further ado, here are 7 essential motorcycle maintenance items you can do yourself. The first essential maintenance item on the list today is changing your own oil and filter. It is really one of the most simple jobs you can do on a motorcycle and requires minimal tools and supplies. The specific tools you'll need will be unique to your motorcycle and what type of drain plug and oil filter your bike uses, but at most a few sizes of wrenches and an oil filter wrench will probably be all that is required. And while this isn't an all-encompassing how-to video, as the process will vary slightly depending on the type of machine, here are a few tips that should apply to anyone who wants to change their own oil on their motorcycle. The first tip is to get your motorcycle nice and hot. Don't just start it and let it idle for a few minutes, but take it out for a bit of a spirited ride for 10 or 20 minutes. The warmer the oil gets, the less viscous it will become and the more of the used and dirty oil will drain out. If you're using a spin-on oil filter that threads onto your engine case, pre-filling it with a couple ounces of oil will help you get a more accurate oil level reading after you restart the bike, as the level will not drop to fill and accommodate the dry filter. Also be sure not to over-tighten your filter or drain bolts. That will cause you plenty of unnecessary grief next time you go and change it again, and it may cause unnecessary leaks from damaging the O-ring or crush washer. For a spin-on filter, put some fresh oil on the O-rings before installing to help seal the filter in place. Changing your oil on a motorcycle is really super simple, and I encourage every new rider to get a service manual for your specific bike and attempt the next change yourself. Seriously, it's not hard. You can do it. I believe in you. Another vital fluid for your motorcycle is your coolant. Now, some motorcycles are air-cooled and do not require coolant, but most modern motorcycles make use of liquid cooling and have a radiator that will need periodic coolant changes. You do not have to change your coolant anywhere near as often as you do your oil, but if you buy a used motorcycle that needs a refresh or you're putting down a lot of miles on your bike, a coolant flush is a pretty simple job to make sure your bike is cooling properly. It is always advisable to research specific service recommendations for your motorcycle's manufacturer, but an average rule of thumb for a lifespan of a motorcycle coolant is a few years or 20,000-ish miles. But again, consult your service manual to get the specific information for your bike. But coolant changes are really quite simple. You drain the old coolant using the drain plug on the radiator. Unlike changing your oil, you want to make sure your motorcycle is cold when changing the coolant so it doesn't explode out and burn you, and then add the new coolant based on the amount required by your bike, and then run the motorcycle for a few minutes with the cap off for the radiator to burp all the air out of the system. After burping the air, you may notice your levels has decreased, so just top the coolant off accordingly, and you're good to go. Most motorcycle coolant is sold pre-diluted these days, but if it isn't diluted already, it's typically just a 50-50 mix of coolant and distilled water. Don't use tap water to fill your coolant because the mineral content can leave deposits in your system. If your coolant was particularly old or dirty, you may consider doing a coolant flush between draining your old coolant and adding your new coolant. But either way, having fresh coolant will help keep your cooling system free and clean of corrosion and deposits. If you're going to be working on your bike, you're going to want to make sure you're using the best tools and parts that are endorsed by experienced riders. That's why we developed our online store at shop.yammydoob.co. I wanted to build a site where I could provide the best products for all my sweet little squids, so we only work with companies who I personally endorse. We have specialized motorcycle tools, all sorts of riding gear, and parts for all kinds of styles. So you can use our year, make, and model feature to find the parts that will fit perfectly to your bike. So whether you need to change your oil, replace your chain, or get some new tires, you can find what you need at shop.yammydoob.co. Plus, this store is an extension of our community, so as a bonus, every dollar spent on the store earns you an entry to win one of our giveaway motorcycles. We always have a bunch of cool bikes to give away, and is one of my favorite things we do here. So if your bike needs a little TLC, head over to shop.yammydoob.co to make sure you have what you need to get the job done right. Now back to the video. Another maintenance task the average motorcycle DIYer should feel comfortable tackling is maintaining their brakes, both in regards to swapping brake pads and flushing and bleeding their brake fluid. Brakes are obviously super important, so don't go messing around with things without having a strong understanding of what it is you're doing. Last thing you want to do is go and take your motorcycle out for a ride and the brakes don't work. But with the right amount of knowledge, some patience, and maybe the help of an experienced friend, you should have no problem maintaining your braking system on your own. To replace the brake pads on your motorcycle, you really just have to remove the calipers with a few bolts, remove the old brake pads, push your caliper piston back, and install your new pads. Reinstall your caliper on the rotor and make sure that everything is tightened out at the appropriate spec. If you have dual discs, repeat the process on the other side. Same for the rear brake that is in need of new pads as well. Then pump the brake lever, few times and pull the fluid back down to the caliper, and you should be on your way. Changing brake fluid and bleeding brakes isn't too complicated either, but may require more patience, a friend, a brake bleeder tool, or any combination of the above. Brake fluid should be periodically changed over time as well. It can attract moisture and begin to break down over time, affecting its ability to work properly. Or maybe you upgraded or replaced a master cylinder and need to add fluid from scratch and bleed the air out of the system. Remember, this isn't a comprehensive how-to guide, but in the most basic description, to replace your brake fluid, you'll need a bleeder hose attached to the bleeder screw. Either pump the brake pedal or lever to pull the old fluid out of the screw while adding fresh fluid at the top, or you can use a vacuum bleeder that will pull the fluid through the lines for you. And then only when you can see fresh, clean brake fluid that is free of air bubbles coming out of the line, you should have a refreshed and bled brake system. Brake fluid is rather caustic, so cover your bike and wear gloves. Brakes are important, so get a service manual and the help of a friend the first time you try to bleed your brakes. But once you know what you're doing, it is a super easy task to accomplish yourself, especially if you invest in a vacuum bleeder. If you have a chain-driven motorcycle, you have to make sure to keep your chain clean and properly lubricated. This is a big one, guys. If you have a belt or shaft-driven motorcycle, go ahead and proceed to the next segment in this video. Keeping your chain clean and lubricated will ensure a long life of both you and your chain and sprocket. The easiest way to clean your chain is by using a paddock stand that lifts your rear wheel off the ground and allows you to spin it freely, although it is possible to make do just by using the side stand. Clean your chain by using a liberal application of chain cleaner and scrubbing it with a brush. Rinse and repeat until your chain is free of any of all gunk and grime. Then dry your chain with a clean shop rag before applying chain lubricant. This is a super simple task, but not something to be overlooked. And while you're cleaning your chain, you can keep an eye out for any of the wear and tear to your chain and sprocket. Look for excessive movement in the chain or broke or worn out teeth on the sprocket. The next maintenance item may not be essential, but it is pretty damn near it, and that is the knowing ability how to install a slip-on exhaust. Like I said, it's not the most absolutely imperative to the function of your motorcycle, but how many bikes do you see that still have a stock exhaust? If you're trying to buy your first bike brand new, you should expect to install a slip-on exhaust. A slip-on exhaust is a super easy modification to install and requires just the removal of a few bolts and a spring. Unlike a full exhaust system or changes to your air filter, a slip-on doesn't require any changes in fuel management, but you could always install a high-flow air cleaner and get a tuner like a DynoJet Power Vision or similar to uncork a little bit of extra power if you were so inclined. Again, not essential, but practically essential, because even if you're not making any more power, it is a way more enjoyable way to hear the character of your motorcycle's engine. It is also important to be able to maintain the health of your tires. Tires, rear tires specifically, see quite a lot of abuse on a motorcycle that will wear down faster than you may expect. It is important to be able to check the wear and tear of your tires and tread life and make sure you don't have any chicken strips so your fast boy friends don't ridicule you at bike night. Your tires are literally the only part of your motorcycle in contact with the ground, so it is imperative that you make sure you have good tread life and proper inflation. An underinflated tire will dramatically impede handling as well as increase tire wear, and a dramatically overfilled tire will cause a loss of traction. Make sure to check your tire PSI, guys. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and it's just so important. When it comes time to get new tires, being handy with a wrench or a spoon could save you a little bit of coin. Even having the means to remove your wheels from your motorcycle or take them to the shop to have new tires mounted and balanced will save you a bit of money in labor costs. If you're feeling adventurous, you could attempt to remove and install your new tires with spoons. In all honesty, this isn't the most fun thing to do, but it is not impossible with the right amount of gumption. I used to do this all the time back in the day. Some tips for spooning tires are lubrication and heat. The rubber will expand to become more pliable when warm. The lube will help spin the spoon around the wheel and get the tire into place. They make special types of lubricants for tire installation, but the most important thing is to avoid water-based lubricants that can cause corrosion within your wheel. The last essential maintenance item is knowing how to maintain your battery, meaning how to check your voltage, jumpstart your bike, or swap your battery entirely. This again is all really simple, but if you're new to motorcycles and have never had to change a car battery or something, this could be new for you. Checking your voltage will allow you to diagnose starting or charging problems. You can use a voltmeter for this amongst diagnosing other electrical gremlins. Being able to jumpstart a motorcycle will stop you from being stranded. Try to avoid jumping a motorcycle from a car battery, but you can jumpstart it from another bike or jump pack. You can also bump start it by rolling in the clutch with the bike in second gear and then pushing the bike until you get it rolling at a decent speed before hopping on, dumping the clutch, and getting the engine started. Being familiar with how to maintain a battery will allow you to comfortably swap in a new battery if you need to, pull out your battery to plug it into a battery tender for longer storage, or even wire in a battery tender for USB chargers right there to the battery. While this wasn't a step-by-step how-to guide, it should be a good introduction for new riders to how to maintain their motorcycle and keep it in good running order. If you're a new rider, be sure to subscribe as we're always making great content geared for beginners. Fact: Wang Ellen is a Chinese farmer who only had a 3rd grade education. He spent over 15 years teaching himself law so he could sue the chemical company who was poisoning his land. He won the case in 2017. Goodbye.
Keep watching.